The night I saw my pregnant ex freezing at a bus stop, wearing my last name on a hospital bracelet, I honestly thought I was hallucinating. 8 months earlier, I'd walked away from her without looking back, convinced I was doing the clean thing. Tell me something. If you saw the person you broke in half sitting alone in the rain, swollen belly, shaking, using your name like it belonged to her, what would you do? My name is Ethan, and people like to call me a cold billionaire. The guy who never lets anything get under his skin, never lets anyone close enough to hurt him. The man who runs his company, his time, his life, like a military operation. That night around midnight, I was driving home the same route I'd driven 1,000 times through streets that felt like part of my bloodstream. Glass towers, wet asphalt, that humming city noise you eventually stop hearing. It was one of those winter nights where the rain is half ice hitting the windshield like tiny needles. The air so raw, it sneaks in around the edges and chills you even inside a warm car. I remember I was barely paying attention, just following the familiar rhythm. Gas, brake, turn, check my phone at the lights. When I got this weird feeling in my chest, like the air got heavier for no reason. I can't explain it, but I eased off the gas without meaning to. My headlights rolled over an empty street, a shuttered corner store, and then an old bus stop, the kind nobody with options uses that late. At first, I saw nothing but a shape, a dark bundle on the bench hunched over rain pouring off the shelter roof and still somehow managing to soak whoever was sitting there. Normally, between you and me, I would have driven right past. I don't stop for strangers in the middle of the night, not in that part of town, not with my last name and all the headlines that tend to follow it. Then the beam of my headlight slid across her face. I swear my hands almost missed the brake. My heart just dropped, like my body knew who she was before my brain caught up. It was Lena, the woman I had cut out of my life with surgical precision 8 months earlier, told myself was a mistake, erased from my contacts, my calendar, my entire world. Her hair was plastered to her cheeks, her clothes were soaked, and she was shaking so hard the movement was visible even from inside the car. But that wasn't the worst part. Her hand, white-knuckled and trembling, was pressed to the side of a swollen stomach. Her belly round and unmistakable, the kind of pregnant you don't need a doctor to confirm. 8 months along, maybe a little more. 8 months since the day I walked away from her. Yeah, that hit hard. My brain started doing math. I didn't want it to do lining up dates and memories and everything I had refused to think about. I could have told myself I was wrong, that it was just the angle to coat the shadows. But I've built empires on my ability to see what's right in front of me. My fingers locked around the steering wheel so tight the leather creaked. For a second, I almost drove on. Pretended it wasn't her. Pretended that was some stranger's life. That would have been the easy thing to do, the old me thing to do. Instead, I killed the engine and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit me immediately, sharp and damp, but it felt like background noise next to the shock burning in my chest. I walked toward the bus shelter, my shoes splashing through puddles, and said her name. Just one word, low and rough, like it got dragged up through a part of me I usually keep locked. Lena. She flinched like someone had slapped her. She turned her head just enough for me to see her eyes wide and glassy pupils blown from exhaustion and fear. And what I saw there wasn't relief, wasn't anger. It wasn't even resentment. It was terror. And not terror of the rain, not of the night, but of me. "Please don't come closer," she whispered. Voice raw and shredded like just speaking hurt. "Now let me ask you, because this is important. If someone you once loved looked at you like you were the last person on earth they wanted near them, like you were danger, not help, what would that do to you?" I stopped mid-step, not because I'm used to obeying anyone, but because she looked like any sudden movement might break her. Her hair was stuck to her face in wet clumps. There was mud on her shoes, and her lips had gone that scary pale blue from cold. She was shaking hard enough that the bench was vibrating, and the way she curled slightly over her stomach, instinctively shielding it from me that hurt, in a way I was not ready for. "What happened to you?" I asked, trying to slip back into that controlled, steady tone I use in boardrooms, the one that usually makes things fall in line. It sounded wrong even to me, too sharp in that small bubble of freezing air. She shrank back like my voice itself pushed her away. I said, "Don't come closer." She whispered again, weaker this time. And that's when I saw it. A small white band around her wrist, half hidden by her soaked sleeve, catching a stray glint of light from the street lamp. A hospital bracelet tight on her skin. When she noticed my eyes flick toward it, she tried to yank her hand back into her coat sleeve, quick, but clumsy, the movement so panicked it made every instinct I have sharpen. I stepped in anyway, ignoring her broken protest, and reached for her hand. Her skin was like ice. Her pulse was racing. But none of that hit me as hard as the words printed in bold black letters across the plastic. Lena Hale. Hale. My last name. For a second, my vision tunneled. I have spent my entire adult life guarding that name like a trademark, like a brand, like a weapon. I don't hand it out. I don't let people use it. I'd never married her, never given her permission to claim it. Yet here it was, wrapped casually around her wrist like it belonged to her. "Why the hell are you wearing my name?" It came out colder than I meant it. Anger, confusion, and something uglier twisting in my throat. Her fingers twitched in my grip. I didn't choose it," she whispered each word, shivering out of her. That made no sense, not in my world. Before I could press, her knees buckled. 1 second she was upright. The next, her body just folded like someone cut the strings. I dropped the questions and grabbed her, catching her against my chest before her head hit the concrete. She felt weightless and heavy at the same time. Freezing skin, rain-soaked clothes, and that solid curve of her belly pressing into me, so real it turned the buzzing in my head into a roar. Her breath was shallow, way too shallow, and up close I could see the tightness around her eyes, the strain in every line of her face. Whatever had happened between us, whatever story we'd told ourselves about clean breaks and moving on, none of that mattered in that moment. She was in danger. I carried her to my car, trying not to think about how wrong it felt, that the first time I held her in 8 months, it was like this. I laid her gently in the passenger seat, buckled her in, brushed wet hair away from her face, noticed how colorless her lips had become. I hesitated for a second with my hand against her cheek, then pulled away, slammed my door, and fired up the engine. On the drive to the hospital, the city blurred into streaks of wet light and shadow. Every red light felt like an insult. My hands, usually rock steady, were trembling on the steering wheel. My brain wouldn't stop racing. Why was she alone? Who did this to her? Why was she wearing my name? Who told the hospital I was her husband? Was this baby mine? Did she nearly freeze to death, holding my child at a bus stop, while I sat in a warm penthouse, telling myself I'd done the right thing? If it were you, would you have been thinking clearly in that moment? Or would your mind have been as much of a wreck as mine was? We pulled up to the emergency entrance, and something in me flipped into automatic mode. I got out, scooped her back into my arms, and carried her through the sliding doors. I could feel the nurses staring. You can't be on the cover of business magazines and then show up like that at midnight without getting noticed. I didn't care. Let them talk. They got her onto a gurney, started checking vitals, asking questions. I stuck to her side, answering what I could, just refusing to let go of her hand. One of the nurses glanced down at the bracelet and said in this casual, offhand voice, Her husband already approved the prenatal file. Everything in me. Her husband. The word echoed in my head like a gunshot. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at that cheap piece of plastic with my last name on it. And for once in my life, I had no script, no plan. Someone had used my identity, my name, my position, and tied it to a pregnant woman I was supposedly done with without my knowledge. They started wheeling her back toward an exam room, and I followed numb and boiling at the same time, like my blood had turned to ice and fire all at once. In the hallway, another nurse stopped me gently. Clipboard in hand. "Sir, we can take her from here." "Do you want to wait in the consultation room?" her husband usually. "Stop calling him that." I cut in quieter than I felt. She blinked. "I'm sorry. It's just what's in the paperwork. The paperwork is fraudulent." I said the words coming out like a verdict, flat and heavy. She took a small step back, realizing whatever she'd stepped in was bigger than a normal night shift drama. They took Lena into a warm room, turned on those heat lamps that bathe everything in this soft orange glow, hooked her up to machines hung IV fluids. I watched through the glass for a second, seeing her small under the blanket, still shaking, still too pale. Then I went in and stood near the foot of her bed, feeling more useless than I ever have in my life. The doctor checked her over and gave me the rundown in that calm, professional voice ER doctors have. Her temperature is dangerously low, she's dehydrated and malnourished, and her stress levels are extreme. We're going to warm her up, give her fluids, monitor the baby, and watch for contractions. She needs rest food and as little shock as possible tonight. I almost laughed at that last part. Too late, Doc. When the doctor left the room, went quiet. Just the soft beeping of the monitor and the low hum of the heater. I stepped closer to her bed, looking at the bruised shadows under her eyes, the strain in her mouth, the way her fingers twitched in her sleep. This was not the woman I had last seen. Fierce, loud, stubborn, the one who argued with me and challenged me and made me feel things I didn't want to feel. This Lena looked beaten, worn down, like life had been hitting her non-stop for 8 straight months, and no one had stepped in to take a punch for her. My eyes dropped to her wrist again. Lena Hale. Someone had taken my name and used it to rewrite her identity on paper without ever asking either of us. It wasn't just wrong, it was intimate in a way that felt like a violation. I reached out and brushed my thumb over the letters, almost like I needed to prove to myself they were really there. "Wake up," I murmured more to myself than to her. "Come on, Lena. Please." Her lashes fluttered. She made a small sound like the first breath when you come up from underwater. Slowly her eyes opened. The moment she recognized me, her whole body went rigid, and in that split second I saw it all. The memories, the hurt, the months of silence she thought I'd chosen. She didn't soften. She didn't relax. She looked like the universe had played a cruel joke on her. "Why are you here?" she rasped, her voice rough from cold and exhaustion. "Because I found you at a bus stop in the middle of a storm, 8 months pregnant and half frozen," I said, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. "What do you think I was supposed to do, just drive past?" She swallowed, eyes drifting to the bracelet to my name on her wrist. "I told you before," she whispered. "I didn't choose this. We're not doing half answers," I said, stepping closer. "You need to tell me who put my name on you. Who signed those papers? Who called this hospital pretending to be me?" Her gaze slid away to the ceiling, the wall, anywhere but my face. "I don't know," she said, but even half-dead tired. She wasn't a good liar, Lena. I pushed, lowering my voice. "Did you ever sign anything with my name on it?" Her eyes snapped back to mine, offended, despite how weak she was. "No." "Then someone forged it." I set my jaw tight. Who told the hospital I was your husband? She hesitated. Then her face crumpled not with anger, but with something closer to shame. I just did what they told me, she whispered. They said it would make things easier. They who I asked. Who is they? She closed her eyes. Tears gathering at the corners, her whole body tensing like she was bracing herself. For what? I wasn't sure. Your assistant, she breathed finally. It was your assistant, and there it was. The first big crack in the story. Pattern interrupt for. You the person you pay to protect your time, your boundaries, your life. What if that person quietly took over your choices and decided who you were allowed to love? My mind instantly went to her. My assistant, the one who'd been by my side for years, the one who knew my schedule better than I did, who filtered my calls, my emails, my calendar. The one who had given me this polite little smile when Lena left my office the day we broke up, like she'd been waiting for that moment. Which one, I asked, even though deep down I already knew. Lena winced as another small contraction rolled through her body, her hand flying to her stomach. The monitors beeped faster for a second. I grabbed another blanket, adjusted the heat lamp, tried to help, feeling completely unqualified, and yet unwilling to back away. Lena, I said again, softer now. Start from the beginning. After we ended things. What happened? She stared at the ceiling for a long moment, breathing slow, gathering whatever strength she had left. When she finally spoke, her voice shook, but there was steel under it. It started the week after we broke up, she said. I found out I was pregnant. I panicked. I didn't know what to do, but I decided you deserved to know, even if you didn't want me anymore. She glanced at me to see my reaction. I stayed quiet, because anything I said right then would have been the wrong thing. I called your company. She went on. Your office, your direct line. I left messages, sent emails. I tried for days. No response. Finally, your assistant called me back. My hands curled into fists at my sides. What did she say? I asked. Lena's jaw tightened. She said you wanted nothing to do with me, she whispered. Nothing to do with the baby. That you told her to block every call, every message. She said you told her, I don't want her, and I don't want her child. Let me tell you, I've heard some ugly lies about myself over the years. But that one detonated something inside me. I never said that. I said my voice coming out low and dangerous. Not once, not even as a joke. I didn't know, Lena. I didn't know. She let out this small, bitter laugh that hurt more than if she'd screamed. You think I didn't want to believe that? She asked. You think I didn't spend nights staring at my phone, begging it to ring, praying the man I thought I knew would show up and prove her wrong? But your silence. Silence is an answer too, Ethan. That one landed. She went on. How she tried to come to my building in person. How security turned her away at the door because her name was flagged. How the assistant had made sure every path to me was barricaded. How she lost her job because she kept missing shifts from morning sickness and fatigue. How clinics refused to treat her because she had no insurance. How she fainted from dehydration one morning and woke up in an overcrowded waiting room where no one knew what to do with her. And every time I tried to reach you, she said, her voice cracking. She answered instead. She sounded so sure of herself, so familiar with your mind. She told me to stop trying to tie myself to you. Said we were over, that you were relieved I was gone, that the baby would only complicate your life. After a while, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She had the power to make it true. Is that when she told you to use my surname? I asked quietly. Lena nodded, eyes glassy. She said if I used your last name on the medical forms, the insurance stuff would move faster, that I'd get better care, that I wouldn't be turned away. She made it sound practical. like she was doing me a favor. "So you agreed," I said. "I was scared, Ethan." She whispered. "I was alone. I had no family, no one else to ask for help. I wasn't trying to steal your name. I was trying not to die in a waiting room while they argued over paperwork." We just stared at each other for a moment. The fluorescent lights hummed quietly overhead. The machines beeped. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled past. "And this baby," I said, finally feeling my throat tighten. "Is it mine?" She looked at me like I'd slapped her. Then her face softened into something tired, something sad. "You're the only man I've ever been with," she said. "What do you think?" Yeah, that happened. Something inside me shifted then, from anger at the situation to something heavier and more dangerous. Obsession. Maybe the need to fix this, to protect what was mine, to hunt down the person who had played puppeteer with both our lives. I told her I'd find out exactly what my assistant had done. I told her she would never have to deal with that woman again. I told her I would make it right, even though we both knew there were some things you can't fully fix. And right around here is where I want you to stick with me, because what happened next will blow your mind. I stepped out for a while when the doctors insisted she needed rest, but I didn't go home. I went back to my office. My investigator was waiting. Yeah, when you have my money and my paranoia, you keep people on retainer whose whole job is to find out the ugly truth you don't see. He slid a thick folder across my desk. "You should sit down," he said. I didn't. Inside that file was everything. Copies of emails Lena had sent that never reached my inbox, call logs, showing her number-blocked internal memos from my assistant to security, telling them to deny Lena access to the building. My supposed instructions not to let her in. My signature on medical consent forms I had never seen. My assistant had been quietly, systematically intercepting any attempt Lena made to reach me, all while playing the loyal gatekeeper at my side, scheduling my meetings, reminding me of my calls, bringing me coffee like she wasn't dismantling my personal life piece by piece. Turned out she'd been obsessed with me for years, convinced that if she could just get rid of Lena, eventually I'd wake up and see her standing there. So she forged my name, used my status, and told herself that anything she did in my name was justified. Here's the twist. While I was standing there in my spotless office reading proof that the person I trusted most had betrayed me, Lena was disappearing again. Somewhere between one set of vitals and the next, she slipped out of her hospital bed, grabbed her things, and walked out. When the nurse noticed she was gone, they searched the halls, the bathrooms, the parking lot. Nothing. The only thing she left behind was a small folded note on the pillow. "Don't look for me." She was in early labor when she wrote that contractions starting to build body, already worn to the edge. When I got that call from the hospital, "Sir, the patient has left against medical advice. We found this note." I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I crumpled the paper in my hand, those 4 words burning into my palm. She still didn't trust me. Or maybe she just didn't trust the world around me. Maybe she thought everyone in my orbit was another version of that assistant, all smiling faces and hidden knives. Either way, I knew one thing. She was out there somewhere in pain, scared about to give birth, and I was done letting other people decide what happened to her. I went back to my car. The storm had come back with a vengeance rain slashing across the windshield, thunder rumbling like the city itself was angry. I started driving no fixed destination at first, just following instinct and memory. I thought about places she used to go. Neighborhoods she'd mentioned, corners of the city that had mattered to her long before she mattered to me. There was this old community center she loved, a place she once told me made her feel safe as a kid, back when it still hosted after-school programs and weekend fairs. Now it was shut down, boarded up, pending redevelopment for years. If you were terrified in labor and convinced you didn't have the right to take up space in a hospital bed, where would you go? I turned down the street where that building sat, broken windows and all, and there she was, Under a flickering street lamp huddled against the wall, rain pouring off the edge of the roof, in sheets body curled around her belly, like she could shield the baby from a world that had already been too cruel. She looked so small in that moment, small and yet unbreakable, just from the fact that she was still breathing. I slammed the brakes, didn't even bother closing the car door all the way as I ran. "Lena," I shouted, my voice echoing off the brick. She looked up, eyes glazed with pain and fear, cheeks streaked with rain and sweat and tears. When she recognized me, something complicated flickered across her face. Relief, anger, resignation, all mashed together. "Why now, Ethan?" she asked, voice cracking. "Why are you here now?" "Because losing you once ruined me," I said, not even thinking about the words before they came out. "Losing you twice will destroy me." Another contraction hit her like a wave. She gasped, fingers clawing at the concrete eyes squeezing shut. I put my hands on her shoulders, tried to get her to breathe with me, like the little I'd read about labor could magically be enough. We both knew it wasn't. I lifted her again, carried her inside the community center, just long enough to get us out of the rain. Tried to lay her on a stack of old gym mats. The place smelled like dust and memories. Lightning flashed through the broken windows, throwing jagged shadows across the walls. Each contraction was worse than the last. Her nails dug into my arms, her forehead pressed into my chest, and she whispered, "Hurts." I'm not proud of how scared I was. I'm not used to being scared. But all I could see was my past repeating itself. My mother on an operating table, my father sitting in a hospital chair, with that hollow look in his eyes. The story I'd been told in half sentences and awkward silences. I was standing in the middle of my worst nightmare, and this time I was the one who had to decide what happened next. What I knew was simple. If I kept her there, we might not all walk out alive. "We're going back to the hospital," I said as firm as I could. "I'm not letting you do this alone on a dirty floor. Not again. Not ever." She barely had the strength to nod, but she didn't fight me. I carried her back to the car, strapped her in, and drove like I have never driven before. One hand on the steering wheel, one hand on her knee phone on speaker as I yelled into it, telling the hospital we were on our way, that she was in active labor, that they needed to be ready. I ran red lights, cut corners, ignored the horns and the laws, and the little voice in my head that usually keeps everything in order. All that mattered was getting her there in time. We screeched up to the emergency entrance again, and this time they were ready. Nurses with a wheelchair, doctors already gloved up someone, taking the baby's heart rate almost before they took her pulse. They rushed her down the hall to an emergency delivery room. I followed, not letting go of her hand, calling her name, when the pain made her eyes roll back. There was no dignity in what happened next, and that's okay. Labor isn't pretty. It isn't neat. It's raw and messy and terrifying. She screamed, she swore, she begged. She squeezed my hand so hard, I thought she'd break my fingers. I whispered into her ear, told her she was the strongest person I'd ever known, that I was here, that I wasn't going anywhere this time. And then suddenly, in the middle of all that chaos, there was this tiny sound, a thin, shaky cry that cut straight through the noise. Our daughter. The doctor held her up for a second. Tiny red, squirming, very, very real. Then handed her off to the nurses to clear her airways and check her vitals. "The baby is stable," he said, and I swear I almost collapsed with relief. "But the mother needs immediate surgery," he added. "She's lost a lot of blood. We need to go now. Sign here." He shoved a clipboard into my hands. No time to read. No time to hesitate. My name at the bottom, the same name that had been forged and abused for months this time, finally doing what it should have done from the start. Protecting her. They took Lena away. I followed as far as I could, scrubbed in, stood in the corner of the OR while they opened her up. The smell of antiseptic hung heavy in the air. Machines beeped, tools clinked against metal trays. Voices murmured low and controlled. My focus narrowed to one thing, the line on the monitor showing her heart rate. For a while it was steady. Then it dipped. Not much at first, then more. Too fast. Alarms started to beep louder. Nurses moved faster. Doctors' voices sharpened. It was like watching a movie I'd already seen, one I never wanted to star in. My chest tightened, my hands went cold, and the room blurred at the edges. I don't pray. I never have. That night I did. Please, I remember thinking. Not even sure who I was talking to. Don't do this. Don't take her. Take my money. Take my company. Take everything else. But don't take her. Somehow, whether it was skill or luck or something in between, they pulled her back. The line climbed slowly, then steadied. The alarms quieted. The frantic energy in the room relaxed by a fraction. They stabilized her, stitched her up, got her to recovery. Hours later, she opened her eyes. I was sitting in a chair next to her bed. Our daughter cradled in my arms, wrapped in a pink hospital blanket. Tiny chest rising and falling in that fragile little rhythm that makes you want to wrap the whole world in bubble wrap. My eyes were burning. My hair was a mess. My shirt was wrinkled and stained. No cameras, no assistants, no boardroom. Just me, the woman I'd almost lost, and the little girl that almost came into the world alone. Lena blinked, frowned slightly, then focused on my face, then on the bundle in my arms. Her whole expression changed. Wonder, fear, love, regret. It all washed over her features like a tide. She's ours. I whispered, my voice breaking. She made it. You made it. Tears filled her eyes instantly. She tried to lift her hand to touch the baby, and winced when the movement tugged at her stitches. I shifted closer, brought our daughter where she could see her better. One tiny fist punched out of the blanket and brushed against Lena's wrist, right where that cursed bracelet had been. I didn't tell you when I found out, Lena said quietly after a while. Not at first. I was afraid. Afraid you'd reject me, that you'd say I was trying to trap you, that you'd see this as a burden instead of her. I shook my head, the guilt almost physically painful. My coldness, I said slowly. The walls, the distance. It wasn't just for show, Lena. My mother died in childbirth. I grew up with that story, like a warning label glued to my heart. I've spent my entire life afraid that if I let myself love someone the way I loved you, I'd end up in a hospital hallway watching her die because of it. So I built a system where nobody got close enough to be that important. And then I showed up, she said, managing a weak half-smile, and somehow slipped through security anyway. Yeah, I said, a sad little laugh escaping. You really did. She looked at our daughter, at me, at the IV line in her arm. You leaving when you did, she said softly. It almost broke me. Your assistant filling in the blanks with the worst possible version of you. That finished the job. I thought I was protecting myself by believing her. I thought if I accepted you didn't want us, it would hurt less than holding on to hope. That clean cut I thought was a kindness, I said, was actually a knife. We sat in that for a moment, no excuses, no spin, just the ugly truth. Then I did the only thing that made sense. Come home with me, I said. Not just to recover. Not just until it's convenient. Not as some temporary arrangement. Come home with me for real this time. Let me be there. Let me carry this with you, instead of watching you do it alone from a distance like a coward. She stared at me with those tired, beautiful eyes, searching my face for any sign of a lie. What if the same world that hurt me once does it again? She asked. What if your people, your company, your habits, what if they swallow me up the way they almost did before? Then I change the world I built, I said simply. I already fired the assistant. Legals all over it. Fraud, forgery, identity theft. The works. She doesn't just lose her job, she loses the power she abused. Security has new orders in writing. You are never turned away. Ever. My calls, my email, my calendar, they don't filter you anymore. And if any of those systems ever hurt you again, I burn them down and start over. You and her, I looked at our daughter, you're the non-negotiables now. She breathed out slowly like she'd been holding that air for months. Then she nodded just once. Okay, she whispered. We'll try again. But no more half-truths. No more disappearing. Deal, I said. A few days later, I carried her and our daughter out of that hospital, not as some scandal waiting to break, not as an inconvenient problem. I was trying to handle quietly, but as my family. In the car, my hand never left them, even when I was driving. I'm sure it looked ridiculous, but I didn't care. We pulled up to the building that had once been the symbol of everything that separated us. Glass steel security barriers, polished marble. This time when we walked in, nobody stopped us. The front desk staff greeted us by name. All three of us. The flags on the security system had been removed, every nasty little note purged. It felt like walking into the same place, and a completely different life at the same time. In the penthouse, everything was too clean, too sharp, like a hotel suite, not a home. I saw it through her eyes, and realized how cold it must have looked before. I'd had baby things brought in, a crib, diapers, tiny clothes that looked impossible small. But even those just sat there, waiting to be filled with real life. I set the baby down, helped Lena to the couch, then locked the door, not to keep her in, but to keep the noise of the world out. I don't want to just patch over what happened, I told her. Yeah, I've done damage control with the people who messed this up. But there's a bigger question here I can't ignore, and that's what I want to leave you with, too. We live in a world where one person sitting behind a desk with a headset and a password can decide who gets through the door and who doesn't, whose call gets answered, and whose gets erased. That assistant didn't just break some HR rule, she played God with two people's lives because she was in love with a version of me that didn't exist. And the system let her. My power, my reputation, my silence. All of that made it easier for her to get away with it, at least for a while. So I'm asking you, do you think people like me are responsible for everything that happens under our name, even when we don't see it in real time? If your employee uses your authority to crush someone who's already vulnerable, does "I didn't know" actually mean anything? Or is that just a convenient excuse? If it were you, and you found out someone you trusted had turned away the mother of your child at your door, blocked her calls, convinced her. You didn't want her all while signing your name on medical decisions. What would you have done? Quietly fire them and move on. Press charges, go public, or try to pretend it never happened so you could sleep at night. I chose not to pretend. I chose to sit with the fact that my distance, my fear, and my precious control made it easier for all of this to happen. Doesn't mean I forged the signatures, but it does mean I left too much room for someone else to do it for me. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Lena was right to use my last name to get medical care, or do you see that as crossing a line? Was she wrong to believe my assistant? Or was that the only choice she had when the system kept telling her the same story? Am I as guilty as my assistant because I walked away and never questioned the silence? Tell me in the comments what you think. What you would have done differently. Who you think carries the most blame here. If you've ever been blocked from someone you needed to talk to, or had your life twisted by a person sitting between you, and help share that too, you have no idea how many people might need to hear they're not alone in that. If this story got you angry or hopeful or just made you think about how power and love collide in messy, unfair ways, hit like send it to someone who'd argue with you about it, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Because sometimes the most unexpected moments really do change everything, especially the ones that start on a cold night at a lonely bus stop with a name on a bracelet that should never have been there in the first place.